The actions parents take to correct their children may look the same, but understanding the difference between discipline and wickedness in terms of attitude and results is quite important. Hello and welcome to Let's Talk. I am Olujoke Musaku on the top with the topic, I beg your pardon, discipline or wickedness. My guest is Mrs. Olawumi Aninye. She is a teacher with the New York City Department of Education Public Schools. So stay with us. Hello, Ma. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, the topic is discipline or wickedness. I would want you to please give us a breakdown of the word discipline and wickedness. And do they by any chance mean the same thing?
Discipline and wickedness are not the same. Discipline is a kind of training that people have received to put certain behavior in order for people to behave in certain ways. And it can also be said to be a code of conduct that this is how you should behave. This is what you should do. This is what is permissible. This is what is allowed. This you can do without passing or crossing any line or boundaries. Discipline can also be when it could be also be when someone errs or someone falls back or someone does something that is not permissible, and then there's certain rules that the person have to, or certain decision that has to be taken because of that behavior. So discipline is either a code of conduct, or discipline can be a type of decision that will be given because of a certain behavior that someone has exhibited, and which is not, maybe it's not allowed. Wickedness, on the other hand, as the word says, wicked, it connotes evil. It connotes what is morally unacceptable in a way. It's a way of hurting. It's a way of making someone feeling less of who they are. Is a way of being evil, committing something that is making another person to feel very, very uncomfortable. It affects them emotionally, it affects them physically, and it causes damage. That's wickedness.
So, in other words, are you trying to? They are not the same thing, right?
They're not the same.
Okay. Now, moving forward, what are the principles and guidelines that parents can take to effectively discipline their words or children, basically?
Oh, okay. There are certain rules, there are certain guidelines that a parent can, put in place to nurture their children. We call it nurturing,
Okay.
because children don't really know how to behave because they're children, they're young, they have a open mind, they have a free will, a free life. But we put certain rules into place to guide them, to direct them, to ensure that they don't go out of line, they don't go out of boundary. And some of the things that parent can do that have been effective is you can have conversation with your children, which is always very powerful. Conversation helps. Conversation in terms of, okay, if you do these are the things that you are allowed to do. These are the things that you are not allowed to do. You can have verbal redirection, verbally redirecting your children. You can also have contracts with them, which is something
Wow.
that we do. Yeah, which is we do that in schools, in school a lot. A teacher student relationship, you have a contract. If you don't do this, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. And the child signs it, and the mother signs it, or the father signs it, or the teacher signs it, and the student sign it. So it's a contract that, but that does not mean that the child will not fall away. Does not mean that the child will not forget. But then, because you already have, a set of a rule in the contract, you can always refer the child back to it. And you know what? They're wonderful, because when you call their attention back to it, then they'll be like, "Oh, I'm, I'm sorry," or because now the child realizes that you are not just coming from nowhere to want to, make them uncomfortable, or to not want to allow them to do what they want to do, but because you already have that in the contract, you already have that conversation. So redirecting always works, having conversation always works, and also having contract with them always works. Especially, talking to kids works.
Okay, so let's quickly have a peep into your own way of parenting style. How has it been working for you?
Oh, yeah. For me, it's been working. It's been working for me because I take what I do in the house, I take it to my job, as in the style of parenting. And I also take the style of parenting with the training that I've received as a teacher into my home as well. And knowing that these same kids in my house, they're also students in another school with another teacher in another school building, it helps. So it's like it's all interwoven. It works for them. And the what I've done with them and what I'm still doing is having that conversation. And also not, behavior is a language. When a child behaves in a way that is not acceptable, the child is speaking out loud. Either the child is crying out for help, or either the child is trying to communicate. So when a child does what is not right, or when my child does something that is not right, you want to think of what is making that child to behave that way. Why is he behaving that way? What does he need? What does she need? So when any of my children does what is not acceptable, I call that child into a room. I go low, to the height of that child, and I speak to the child. One thing that children doesn't like, they don't like when you correct them in the open. They don't like when you correct them with other children there or other adults there. You can excuse a child and bring the child to a place where it's just you and the child. And then you talk to the child, and the child is going to listen, because one, you're respecting the child as well. You're respecting that child as a human being, as someone that has a mind of his own. It doesn't matter the age, 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, it works. Bring the child to a place of enclosure and speak to the child in a way that the child will understand that, why did you do that? And also the contract works for me as well. You told me, you promised that you're not going to do this, so why do you do it? And because we have rules, where there is no rule, there is no sin. And where there are rules, then the sin will be will be justified. I mean, the rule will be justified when there's a sin, and you bring the child back to a place of him trying, getting him to understand that you did this. Remember what we said, that it's not going to happen. And it's been working. It's been working for me. The place of talking to them, the place of having conversation, the place of one-on-one conversation. I mean, I bring my son to my bedroom, I close the door, and I talk to him. And when I do that, Mommy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You see that they calm down, and they feel that they've done something, they realize where they fall back. But if you try to do it in the open, the child can get more defiant and say no, because that's the personality of every human being. They want to make you feel like, no, you can't talk to me like that. But if for you and for the child, you can bring the child to a safe place and speak to the child and correct the child in love.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful so far. Let's quickly go on this break, and when we come back, we continue from there. Stay with us. The program is Let's Talk, and if you are just joining us, well, I won't say you've missed a lot, but you actually missed something. And I would advise you to actually stay with us as we continue on the ride. My guest is still Mrs. Olawumi Aninye. She is a teacher with the New York City Department of Education Public Schools. So let's continue from there. Yes, what is the place of discipline in school, and at what point does disciplining a child becomes pure wickedness?
In schools, the place of discipline, especially in New York City, where I work, um, there's what we call code of conduct. A code of conduct is a set of rules that guides a school. Is a set of rules that every parent must sign, and the student must also sign it. And what is in that code of conduct is a statement of what the school allows and what the school does not allow. And if any of those things happen, they also state there what is going to happen. And it's such a great um, um, system, because when a student does anything, the parent cannot say, "Oh, why did you do that to my child?" The reason, because there has been a contract, there has been a letter sent home, there's been the code of conduct that have been sent home, and the parents have attested. You read it and you sign to it. So you agree that if your child hears, these will be the consequence. We often use the word consequence, we don't use the word punishment. Okay. In the school system. Okay. So if a child, take for an example, if in a school there's been a rule that when your child brings the phone to school, the child will have to hand over the phone in the morning to the teacher so that it does not become a distraction while the teacher is trying to teach. And for some reason, your child brings out the phone and is using the phone in the classroom. There's also what we call, there's also room for time, to allow the child to obey or to follow the rule. And you give them, a leeway in a way. If that's the first time that the child is going to bring the phone, you might say, okay, listen to me. This is not allowed. You cannot have phone while I'm teaching in the classroom. But if it becomes a pattern, if it becomes a habit, then the rule, the code of conduct rule has to be put in place. That is one aspect. Another aspect is we have the dean in schools, and what the dean does, the dean of students, what their own role in the school system is to have, they are mediators. When there are problems, when there are conflict, the conflict could be between the teacher and the student, it could be student to student. The dean of students intervenes, they are mediators, they bring the student into their office and they try to find resolution. Why did you do that? Why did you behave that way? We also have the set of counselors in the school system. The counselors are the ones that, because as I said earlier, behaviors are always due to certain the languages. When a child behaves in a way, it could be that the child is crying out loud for help, that I need help. But he's not saying that I need help, but he's acting it out. So the counselors come in that way and they counsel the children to figure out, what the problem is. And they're able to kind of, redirect them, find solution to the problem that the kid is having so that the kid does not continue to behave in a way that is not acceptable.
Recently, I saw on the news a principal that beat up a child with a kind of bat, something very big, and the child is like, I think the child is around 10 or 8, 7, or around between 8 and 10, like that. And it's actually, for, I'm sure most parents wouldn't like that. Is that part of it too? You can actually flog a child?
In the school system, in New York City public school system, you are not allowed to put your hand on any kid. You are not allowed to put your hand on any student. That's being called corporal punishment. And it's a law, it's a chancellor's regulation that you cannot put your hand on any kid and you cannot verbally abuse students as well, because they have dignity as well. They need their self-respect as well. And we cannot say because of their younger children that we will take advantage of them. And as I said earlier, the place of talking to, the place of redirection, the place of bringing that child to the dean, bringing that child to the counselor, and having people to that have been designated to deal with that type of situation are there. It's not in a place for a teacher to pick a stick or a paddle or anything to paddle the child. That's not acceptable in the school system where I work. Um, I'm not sure if in the states where that happened, if it's allowed, but I know in America in general, it's not allowed in the school system to inflict pain on any child. There are many ways that situations can be dealt with in the school. There are many ways that behavior can be corrected in the school system, and not to result to having having to put the hand or a cane or a stick or paddle or anything on any child. If that happens, I think it's unacceptable, because for a parent as well, you wouldn't want your child to go to school and someone paddles your child and your child comes home and says, "Oh, my teacher paddles me." How would you feel as a parent? The parent can be called. We call parent all the time. I'm always calling. I have on my parents' number, my phone, my cell phone is on a speed dial. And I dial them and I call them and I tell them what's going on. And they tell, okay, don't worry. I'm going to speak to the child when he gets home. I'm going to, I will step in and all that. And we have the deans, we have the counselors, and you can call the parent as well, whatever the situation may be. But we are not allowed to put hands on the kids.
Okay, I'm actually smiling. Why? Because I want to take you back to Nigeria, where we all have experiences of teachers beating the hell out of a child, especially maybe you're late to school or you did anything wrong and you're being beaten, you're flogged. There's this thing they call in the south, they call it pankere, and in the north is this there's this grinding machine, the belt. That's what they will use to actually beat us up when we come late. We know all those teachers, we can remember their names and all, and parents won't even budge, they won't bother, because even children are more scared of their teachers than parents. Because when you're at home and the parent is trying to put you straight and you refuse to listen, the next thing they'll say is threaten you with your teacher. But it's the other way around. So would you say at that time it was also wickedness from where we come from?
Thank you for that question. I guess you want to put me on the spot with this one. So, ah, okay. From where we come from, paddling is allowed. Paddling is is a way of life. It's acceptable. The society does not frown at it. And as I said, where there is no rule, there is no sin. But where there is rule, or where there are rules, then there are sins, because once you hear from the rule, then it becomes a sin. So where we come from, that was the order. The teacher was allowed to paddle. The teacher was allowed to beat you. The teacher was allowed to punish you. To do whatever. And even when your parents hear about it, they do more to you. But one thing that I know is that they did that to so many of us, but it's in a way, it affected us emotionally. It affected us in, we could not explain it then, but now when you remember it, you feel like, oh, the memory doesn't feel right, doesn't feel good. And I want to say that back home, they did not have the dean, they did not have the counselors, they did not have the teachers did not have the training as to what to do when a child is doing certain behavior that is unacceptable. They did not have a code of conduct. They did not put it, those things were not put in place to guide the teachers or to guide the principal, the headmaster, the headmistress, to allow for students to behave in a way that they want them to behave at that time. The only thing they had was the cane. The only thing they had was the stick. Here it's different because you've been trained. You've received the training not to do that. And they've put into place certain things that you can do. If you know even you cannot handle a child, you can call the next door teacher. Can you take this kid? If the kid have a better relationship with another adult, the kid can go to that adult for that time that there's conflict. Back home, there was nothing like that. The only thing the teacher knows to do was to bring out the cane. The only thing the parent knows to do was to beat. There was no, measures in place to kind of guide them, to help them. I'm not saying that children don't behave in a way that is unacceptable. The teachers don't just beat because they want to beat in Africa and Nigeria. They don't just beat because they want to beat you. They beat because the child has done something wrong. But when the child has done something wrong, there are the measures to approach it different from being physical with that child and damaging them and putting them in a place of emotion that hurts their feelings, that hurt their body, and you never know where it would take them. I mean, sometimes I remember how I was beaten and all that. When I remember, it makes me shiver now because it's something that happened in the past. But don't forget that the brain does not forget; it stays there.
Okay, so now let's quickly digress to house helps, maids, subordinates, people working with you. Discipline in this aspect or the way we treat them, how would you describe that? Some do it nicely while some are just out of it.
I'm still going to say the same thing, what I've said before. The housemaid is also someone else's child. The housemaid or the houseboy or the helper, to put it in a better way, is also a human being. And what you do to your child or to children should also be applicable to them. We don't want to say because they are helpers, they are strangers in our houses or in our homes, then they should be treated, differently or with cane or with spoon, lashing out at them and hurting them. As Christians, as believers, and this should not be happening to them. Wickedness should have no place. I'm not saying they don't do things that are wrong. I'm not saying they don't hear. I'm not saying they don't do, um, fall back. But the way we approach it also matters. The way we treat them also matters. No one should be beaten. No one should receive the punches, especially when people come to live with us. But we can talk, we can dialogue, we can have conversation, we can put rules into place that, listen, don't do this. If you do this, this will happen. You can have a contract with ourselves too. You can have contract with helpers as well. And in the case of subordinates, don't forget that it's a child that grows into an adult and it's the same dignity that everybody wants. If your subordinate does something that that it's not unwanted, there's a place of having that talk too, or already have the measures in place that if you do this, this is going to happen. So the subordinate knows that, okay, if I do this, I've crossed the line, I've overstepped, and this is going to happen. So that really helps. A preconceived or a pre-outlined set of rules always help. So those are the ways that people can be managed, that behavior can be corrected. that discipline can be instilled, but not wickedness. Wickedness is an extreme way of discipline. That's an extreme.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful having you. Do you have any final word?
My final word is um I would say that there's a difference between discipline and wickedness. And wickedness should not be our own forte. We cannot to we don't want to be there. We don't want to be in a place of wickedness. You want to be in a place of discipline, because discipline is a set of rule that when people know, and they can follow that. But wickedness damages people, and it can demoralize them physically, emotionally, make them act awkwardly, socially, and it affects the society at large as well. If someone has been damaged, because of wickedness, then the person feels that, oh, wickedness is a way of life, because that's all they know, and they want to carry that out, and it affects us in our neighborhood, in our community, in our society, and in the country, or in the whole world at large. So we don't want to be in a place of wickedness. Discipline is fine, but discipline, as far as the person knows, there's a pre-arrangement or a code of conduct that people know that I need to do this. If I don't do this, this is going to happen to me. And then we have people support system, and like we have the counselors, we have the dean, we have people that can really help a child or students to retrace back their step to the original state of having a nice behavior.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again. And thank you too for staying tuned, for watching this edition of Let's Talk. And like she said, wickedness damages people. So if you want to discipline in the right way. And I will also leave you with this. Study shows that parents who balances love and discipline without compromising any produces well-adjusted kids who maintain a positive relationship with mom and dad. So do your best to maintain, to bridge the gap between discipline and wickedness in your home as a teacher, as a parent, as an adult. Until next time, I remain Olujo Kemusako. Bye for now.